Going to work on building your fluency with standard algorithm when it comes to division. And so the first step that we're going to do, the first lesson that we're going to look at, is we're going to review using estimation. And why we like to estimate before we start devising is it helps us find and assess the reasonableness of an answer. So when we look at estimation, we're going to use rounding, which is going to round to a place value, or we're going to look at using compatible numbers. And I find that I tend to like compatible numbers better than rounding when it comes to division because I can manipulate the numbers to make it to where it's an easier problem for me to divide to where I can then use my multiple of 10 rule. So take a look at page 274 and let's look at your first problem. And it says a theater sold 3,084 tickets for a show. The seating in the theater is divided into sections. About how many sections will be used to seat all of the ticket holders? And then you'll notice in the picture it says 64 seats in each section. So I'm going to set up my problem, my original problem. So I have 3,084, and I'm going to divide that by 64. So when I do 3,084 and I divide that by 64, I want to estimate to assess that reasonableness. So I'm actually going to rounding in compatible numbers is going to be the same thing for this problem. I'm going to take 64 and I'm going to round it. So when I do my rounding in compatible numbers, I always start with the divisor because then this is the value that I can manipulate to make it easier. So I don't round this one first. I change my divisor first. I always change the divisor first when I'm using estimation because it makes it easier to find a number that's near 3,084 that's a multiple of 60. And so in this case, it's going to be 3,000 because I'm looking for a math fact that I can use with the 6 to do that. So if I take a look at my math fact, I'm going to have 6, and I'm actually going to do 630 divided by 6. That's my math fact. And I'm going to use now my multiple of 10 rule to get rid of zeros. So when I do that, I'm going to take a 0 off of the 60. And remember, my multiple of 10 rule, if I take the 0 off of the 60, I have to take a 0 off of my dividend. Now, I can't take both zeros off and move them over here because I'm using the 30. The math fact I'm looking at is 30 divided by 6. So when I look at that, I have this 0 right here that's left. I'm going to take that 0 and I'm going to write it over here on the quotient. And when I put it over here on the quotient, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of it on my divisor. Now remember, the multiple of 10 rule allows me to manipulate and move zeros as long as I do the same thing to both sides. So by taking the 0 off here, I put it off here, I'm still working within that multiple of 10 rule. And then I do 30 divided by 6, and I get 5. So my answer is going to be about 50. So 50 is going to be about my answer for the number of sections that will be used to seat all of the ticket holders. Okay, pop down to the convince me. Suppose each section of the theater has 96 seats. About how many sections would be used to seat all of the ticket holders? Use estimation to explain. So, still within that 3,084, but this time I'm going to do 96. So this would be an example of where rounding is probably going to be a better value. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to take 96. 96, if I round that, that's going to round to 100. Notice that I started with the divisor. I always start with the divisor when I'm rounding or finding a compatible number because it makes it easier for me to do the manipulation with the quotients. So I'm going to then take this value. And again, 3,000 is a nice number to use. So I'm going to use 3,000. I use my multiple of 10 rule to say, hey, I'm going to take off zeros here. And if I take 2 zeros off in my divisor, that means I need to take 2 zeros off in my dividend, and I'm left with 30 as my answer. So it would be about 30 sections would be needed for all ticket holders. All right, go to number 1 on your guided practice. So to estimate 2,265 divided by 74 with division with the compatible numbers 2,480 give a reasonable estimate. Is there another pair of compatible numbers you can use for an estimate? Explain both answers. So again, and they're saying that if I made 80 my compatible number, so here I don't want to round this to 2,200 because 22 is not 22 divided by 8 is not a math fact. That is going to give me a whole number answer. When we do estimations, we want whole number answers, and we want math facts that we can solve very quickly. I can solve 22 divided by 8, but I can't solve it mentally with a decimal answer. I can, but I can do it with the quotient. We want whole number estimations, okay? So when we're doing estimations, we're estimating to find whole number quotients. So I look for a math fact of 8 that is going to be near 22. So you'll notice that when I do this, I'm looking just at the first digit in the 8, and I'm looking at the first 2 digits in my 4-digit number. So a math fact that's near 22 is going to be it's going to be 22. It's going to be 24. So I'm going to do 2,400, and I'm going to divide that by 80. And when I divide 2,400 by 80, I'm going to take those zeros off. I have that 1 0 that I'm going to go ahead and bring over to my quotient, and I'm left with 24 divided by 8. So I get 30 as my answer. So it's a reasonable estimate because, yes, I rounded up here and I rounded up here, but my answer is going to be somewhere between 22,065 and 2,400. Okay, so another pair that I could do with this value is I could take the value and I could look at the 7 and say, yep, that 70 or that 74, I'm gonna go ahead and round that down to 70. And so when I round 74 down to 70, I'm now looking for a math fact of 7 that's near 22. Well, that's going to be 21. So I'm going to do 21,000 divided by 70. Use my multiple of 10 rule, take off the zeros. I'm left with 210 divided by 7. Well, 21 divided by 7 is going to be 3, and I have that 0 left over. Notice that when I'm doing this, I'm not making, for the most part, big numbers. I want my numbers to end in zeros so I can use that multiple of 10 rule and find those math facts very quickly. Your estimates are something that you should be able to do quick and mentally. And so you really should be looking at how can I turn these large numbers into numbers that have zeros that's going to give me a math fact that I know. Okay, take a look at number 2. It says Caesar and his crew have 765 bottles of water to put into cases. They put 24 into each case. Caesar thinks they will need about 40 cases. Is the best estimate why or why not? So when we're critiquing the reasoning of others, if you remember, we need to go ahead and assess their work. So we need to do it first. So I'm going to do 765, and I'm going to divide that by 24. So 24, I'm actually going to change this value. So again, when I change values, I change the divisor first and then worry about this. So I'm going to actually change this to 25 because 24 is very close to 25, and 25 is math fact that I know pretty easily. And so when I do 25, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take the 765 and I'm going to make it 750. And when I make it 750, I know that 750 is a multiple of 25. And so I'm going to use my math fact. So I'm going to take off the 0 here. And when I take this 0 off in the dividend, I put it over here in the quotient. And now I'm left with 75 divided by 25, which is going to be 30. So 40 is not a best estimate. The best estimate is going to be 30 because here's the estimate that Caesar did. He did 800 divided by 20 to get to 40. That's a good reasonable estimate. If I had that as my estimate, I'd say, yep, my answer is reasonable. But 750 divided by 25 equals 30 is the best estimate because 750 is really close to 765 and 25 is really close to 24. So the closer I can get with my rounding and still have that 0 at the end and have that basic math fact that I can do, that's going to give me my best estimate. Okay. And so with that, we're going to go ahead and we're going to get some practice time. I'm going to do 2,863 and I'm going to divide that by 43. Now remember, when you guys are showing your estimates or when you're doing your estimates, my expectation in terms of modeling with math is I want to see the estimations that you use. So I don't just want to see an answer that you found, and I don't just want to see something that looks like that. Okay, I want to see what you used for your estimation. And so 70 is going to be my choice because I'm going to take 40 and I'm going to round it down, or 43 and I'm going to round it down to 40. And then my compatible number that I'm going to use is I'm going to use 2,800. Because if I used rounding here, it would round up to 2,900, which is not going to give me a nice, easy math fact. So then again, show my thinking. You don't need to show this step if you've got it, but it's nice to see, oh, I can use that multiple of 10 rule to manipulate zeros. I took off 2 zeros here. This 0 I crossed off, put it over here. 28 divided by 4, and I get 70. Okay. Next math fact I'm going to do is I'm going to do 3,277 divided by 12. And I'm actually going to leave 12 alone because I like that value for 12. And I'm going to find a math fact that's going to be near 12, which is going to be 3,600. 3,600 is going to be near 12. So my answer is going to be, look here, 36 divided by 12, 3. And then my 2 zeros come over to this side, and I end up with 300. I could also have done, and it would have worked for this problem, I could have done 3,000 divided by 10, and I still would have gotten 300 as a reasonable estimate. Either one of those would have worked if I had taken 3,277 and rounded that to 3,000, took the 12, rounded that to 10, my answer still would work. Okay, that's still a reasonable answer. 468 divided by 61. So I'm going to leave it at 60 is the value that I'm going to use. And then 468, I'm actually going to go up to 480. And when I do 480 divided by 60, I'm left with 8. Okay, so the next value I'm going to do, if I do 146 divided by 9, I'm going to take the 9. I'm going to use rounding for this one. Rounding, so I'm going to do 10 divided by, and then I'm going to do 150. Again, notice I'm always doing the divisor first. I always do the divisor first because then it allows me to change the dividend into a compatible number that's going to be easy to divide. Okay, so 150 divided by 10 is going to be 15. All right. So you are going to go ahead and do your independent practice. You're going to do all of your values, your independent practice. I expect to see showing me your estimate with your work. You're doing 9 through 20, showing me your estimations, and then you're doing all of your